Lived with my parents in a house not far from they were always different in strict morals and complex character, so they're in our house. Only one my friends with whom they could a little was Lyoka. I knew him from the first grade and probably only he could trust me in a difficult situation. Unlike Mai, who were easier to scold me for my mistakes than to teach them not to, Lyoha was always ready to help and help with advice. He had than I did. He up without a father, worked since 14 years and even had time to hang out with girls. I was jealous of him, but not in a way. Rather, I was glad that he was on all life fronts. He was. My mother was an alcoholic. She half of the one. But he still had what I have in my childhood. Year after his retirement, she died. So Lyoha got a week ago. He came to visit me in the evening. My parents went to theater, so the house was in our control for next 3 hours. We didn't think what to do. They're setting them in Lyoka's despite my age, 19 years old. Father was categorically against my son spending night somewhere outside house. Therefore, idea of my friend to buy me an expensive apartment on the outskirts of was very positive. My parents didn't buy, and I was to save money in most of a way until best times. I'd buy a decent house for this. You can do, smiled Lyoha. Not only decent, but also new, in the news. Funny. My voice sounded upset. I'm serious, Lyoha, I have already figured out. Our neighbor recently did now lives and rejoices. Your money will for an apartment in an old 5-story building on the outskirts. It was even during the Soviet period. Builders poorly leveled the foundation and formed the mold, and heat flew. The house was as and is being prepared for demolition, and the residents will in the new buildings. Are you offering me to live in a mess that can any moment fall on head? I satisfied I enough for Lyoshi, you live there less than month. Will have to, but will 100%. You get a 2 in the new buildings. How you motivation? I told him that I think and give my decision tomorrow. It was necessary to discuss with the parents, let them mentally prepare for purchase in case of their agreement. The conversation was long. I brought a bunch for the purchase and explained Lekin's plan. After a decent period of time, Mai supported my idea, and my father, although he rather supported her so that I could finally get of them. But I didn't care. I was happy and went to Lekin. He showed me about a sale that he found on internet for a little less than the amount that I had saved. The seller turned out to an adequate young guy, little older than us, Lyoka. The apartment was to buy his whom he did know. Therefore, any warm feelings for the housing and put it on sale a day after the inheritance. The apartment was on 4th floor. Iron doors stood out against background of the rusted and painted walls, but behind it was not the best sight. It smelled like the best years of the district cats that was pasted in some places. Instead of chandelier, there was one weekly light. The kitchen was cracked in the lower corner. Fortunately, it's summer, so surviving here 2 weeks did mean death from frostbite. There was an exit to balcony there, an old TV and a sofa, on which the grandmother, we immediately gathered and covered with a sheet. We were not particularly superstitious, but we did really want to. In the place where a man there was a wardrobe, a bed and a well, you can, smiled Lyosha. Maybe I'll with you? After apartment is listed after me, which means I will be moved in any case. There is a thing. Lyosha crouched. I don't live alone. Remember from the stream? Everything became clear. I have to hear. At least there is all convenience here, and the outside world. Going to spend night with my parents did allow me conscience, and I really want to see expression of the who saw helplessness and unpreparedness in his son's life. In the evening we moved my things from my parents, and Lyoka left home. I only water from the tap so I decided to go to store. The 5-story building was a little far from the rest because of way to the store took a decent amount of time. When I returned, It got dark, the lights near my entrance. I noticed after little mumbling. I decided to come up. "Who are you?" asked the with female voice. I hear. I turning away from the door. The silhouette turned off the cigarette and approached me. It was a woman of height, middle age, well preserved for her age, but with smoked Ludmilla. She stretched her hand. "Sergey, how long you been here, Sergey?" "Today I in, and you?" "All my eye of here." The Chunishes believe that we can easily hear. They promise new apartments, and will give a bed in the dormitory. In best case. Ludmilla, but it here. I'd live here, let this crack pass least across the apartment. There are many people, live she in politeness. "No, me, yes, Boris Anatolyevich. He used to in the fleet, he this apartment for service years. Then his daughter with her family died here, he alone here, on 5th floor." We talked for a few more minutes, until another silhouette appeared. His posture was flat, and the step was hard. But the cramp on one leg and heavy breathing were by the old man. "Meet Seryozenko Boris Anatolyevich." Ludmilla turned to the man came to light. It was old man with gray head and mustache. I reached out, but did not. His eyes gave out anxiety. He was worried, but I did do the door at night, said the old man. "Door?" I asked again. The old man did answer and silently hurried up the stairs. Ludmilla looked. There were so after a while we went home. I don't know why, but the door request made me a little confused. At night I closed the door at full speed, as is the door leading to my room, the last one on a small shelf. I couldn't sleep long time. Different thoughts, a new place, and they didn't out my head. Probably confused. I thought and calmed down. Night I was by thud from the apartment upstairs. There was something heavy on then heavy steps. Again the thunder. And last drop became something glass, broken from floor. I got from bed and knocked the battery for hours. The thunder stopped. The rest of the night went by calmly. In the morning before the institute, I met Ludmilla and politely asked her what kind apartment was above me. She smiled and replied, "Boris Anatolyevich's apartment is exactly Merizim. Last stage. Things are I," and smiling, Ludmilla went to school. The day went by as usual. After a couple, I looked at Lyoka, met with Liza and spent time until evening. I returned home late, under light of the lanterns. A silhouette. "How did go, Ludmilla?" I smiled at my neighbor. She did answer, but just looked at me with frightened look. "Something happened?" I asked Saya. "Serious, I don't know." Her voice was trembling. She continued, "I just came back from work, stood here and smoked, and then suddenly I went to my window, and their light turned on." She swallowed the saliva and exhaled. "And then, once it turned off. Maybe there is someone there?" "Enough for you," smiled. "He is older than us together." "Here do you want me to come and check?" "If it's difficult, serious." After calming she and pulled the keys for how I cursed myself for this. But it was too. I had a gas cylinder which gave me little confidence. The door to Ludmilla's was closed. I opened the door and quickly turned on light in the corridor. No one. I checked the kitchen, then the hall and bedroom. Empty. Didn't to down again, so I decided to shout at Ludmilla and she happy, raised head and went into entrance. She offered to drink tea and sit with her, but I politely refused and ran to my room. About an hour I was at my laptop and watching TV. The window was completely open and I also heard everything that was outside. Whether voices passing by, alcohol, or sounds of by far away. Suddenly I heard a scream. Female scream. I jumped out my seat and looked out the window. Nobody. Again scream. Now I understand, they from our house. My head came together. My whole body as if had a big piece of for moment, and again warm ringing horrified it. Only Ludmilla but who could harm her? Her what if he her? She 40 and she is lonely. Maybe her ex-husband. And if she did open door, then where? I froze for a second. My eyes opened so wide that would seem that they would out. My breath froze. I did check that the thought hit my brain and left its mark. The stoop stepped back and I grabbed the phone and hid behind the curtain to see who comes out of and if is necessary to identify the criminal and the police. The dispatcher told me that the had already left and would be there. The Bobek rushed in 10 minutes. During this time, no one left. 3 policemen and one began to wait outside. I waved his hand and called the apartment number so that they could take my testimony and knock on. These were 2 operators. They recorded everything I told them, and then they invited me to the apartment. Ludmilla's was in bathroom. The trail was from the bathroom to the window and kitchen. Probably she wanted to for help or escape. The cause of death was not established, not a single wound. Blood just out her, and nails on his were broken, as if she was before death. To police, the door had to be opened, which means that the criminal had access to apartment. The investigators that the killer left the building through the and went out to other door, which leads to side B and is located on opposite side window. It was unbearable difficult. I called Lyoka and suggested that he come too. Lyosha was reluctant, but arrived. Liza stayed at home so she didn't keep by the speaking of my grandfather. I didn't tell the police what's point. They will start interrogating and he will. The 2 men of I night passed just as usual. At about 4:00 I heard a familiar thud and quiet voice. And then again blow. Something glass against the wall. Loud steps as if the man started to jump on the. After 5 minutes, everything quieted and I fell asleep. Morning, Lyoha shared his impressions after the night shift. Not only did you me on the floor, I couldn't sleep, said. So some idiot also me out with jumps in the middle of the night. Did you hear that too? This is neighbor on top, grandfather frostbite. Neighbor on top? So you have a psycho and you forced me go to you and climb up the dark stairs? And suddenly and I was my head began to thoughts of how he goes down to her, opens the door, hides in the bathroom and waits until the defenseless woman will be at and decides to a shower after a hard-working day. Enough for, I said. He barely breathes and is unable kill. Day flew by quickly. There were only 2 pairs. Therefore I returned early to apartment of Kludmila. I met him on the site and asked about the Luda. He told that she had no and had never been. I was in life. And he himself lives in another city, and came here only for the funeral of his sister. Rest of day at home. I watched TV. It was 2 I was in. Night I was woken up by the noise from this time they more often and stronger. As if trying to break through the floor somehow I managed fall asleep. I very early, the Lyoka did out of my head. Is Grandpa really capable of something like this? After all, I decided to call the police. The squad arrived an hour. They read me for not telling me about all the residents of the house. They even scared me with when I told about my suspicions. Investigator decided to immediately interrogate that they told to go with them, as if mistake. They on the door for time, Boris did open it. Then the investigator decided to break the door. Fortunately it was wooden. There was a well-kept apartment where portraits of Boris Anatolievich and his family, but the grandfather himself was, the bedroom was closed. Investigator knocked. Silence. Then he ordered the operator to break out this door too. The barrier fell off loop and we entered the room. The bald and thin-bodied Boris Anatolievich was sitting in a chair in front huge mirror. His gray hair which either pulled out from his head or he pulled out himself. And fragments of glass, smeared with blood. The old man's were open and looked at the reflection of the door and mirror. He looked straight us. Investigator called in and the old man was away. I stayed at home. I didn't go to college. Called Lyoka, but he didn't answer phone. I became lonely and terrible. At night I closed all the doors and windows, went to with the lamp and fell asleep. It dawned. I opened my eyes. I at the ceiling and thought, suddenly the from above, jumps and fast running around the apartment. Now in morning running is engaged, I thought. Consciousness of situation came in couple of seconds. I jumped off bed and dialed the police. Time was long. The noise was quiet and I heard a police car. The apartment was no one. I collected laptop, money and passport. He agreed to be with me before my departure, so I very quickly. From all horror, I even forgot where the mobile phone, so I had to dial him from my home phone, which I had before. On the to Lyoka, the investigator told me the results of the autopsy. Turns out that he was dead for at least 3 days. He was killed. He told us about the door. I to Lyoka stayed with him until the evening, while he was at institute. Upon his arrival home, we decided to 3 of our friends with us and take my remaining in the apartment. The lanterns began to up when we approached the house. It was bad idea to go in evening. When at the house, I looked out my windows, the light turned on for a moment, and when I almost fainted. How we home. I remember just that I was to everyone to this house. Now I Lyoka. I'm waiting for demolition and recently discovered a missed call from my phone in my apartment. I threw card with my mobile phone. Not my problems.